I never thought the words that would end my life as I knew it would come from my own daughter, on my birthday, standing in the kitchen of the house I paid for. "You're just a burden on our shoulders." She didn't shout. She didn't hesitate. She said it like a fact, like a bill overdue, like something she'd been rehearsing for a long time. I stood there, holding a folded grocery list. Steaks, corn, charcoal, a simple barbecue, just a few friends. Just one quiet evening to remind myself I still mattered to someone. "I just need a ride to the store," I said. "It's my birthday." She laughed. Not kindly, not awkwardly. She laughed the way people do when they're finally tired of pretending. "You think that makes you special?" she said. "You live here. You eat our food. You use our utilities. Everything revolves around you." Her husband appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, already annoyed. "Can't you figure it out yourself?" he said. "We're not running a charity." That word stuck with me. Charity. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I picked up my coat and walked out. That was the moment I still thought dignity meant silence. By the end of the night, they told me to leave. Not suggested, not discussed. Told. I packed one suitcase, clothes, toiletries, a photograph of my late wife. I placed my house key on the coffee table and walked out into the cold Montana night like I was trespassing in my own life. I slept in a cheap motel, thin walls, stale air, a bed that creaked when I turned. And for the first time in years, I slept deeply. The next morning, I woke up clear-headed, calm, not angry, not emotional, cold. I used to believe that love was proven through sacrifice, not the loud kind, not the kind that demanded applause, the quiet kind, the kind where you give and never keep score, because keeping score feels selfish when it comes to family. I was wrong. When my wife Maria died, everything changed overnight. Third 7 years of marriage ended in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and unfinished goodbyes. Alice was 28 then, old enough to be independent, young enough to still need a father. I promised myself I would be both. I became her safety net, her emergency plan, her silent partner. I paid her college tuition in full, $43,000 over 4 years. Books, housing, meal plans, the little unexpected fees that always came up. I never once asked how she was spending her money. I told myself trust mattered more than control. When she got married, I paid for the wedding, $28,000. Venue, catering, flowers, photographer. I remember standing at the reception, watching her dance, thinking it was worth every penny. That night, I told Maria's picture on my nightstand that our daughter was going to be okay. When her husband Logan lost his job, I stepped in again. $18,000 for a car so he could get back on his feet. $15,000 more for a business idea that never went anywhere. Then another $30,000 when his partner vanished and creditors started calling. Every time there was a story. Every time there was urgency. Every time I told myself this was what fathers did. 2 years ago, when they couldn't afford rent anymore, I bought the house. I put it in their names because I didn't want to feel like a landlord. I told them I just needed a room, somewhere quiet, somewhere to finish my days with dignity. I paid the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, the repairs. When the kitchen needed remodeling, I wired $12,000 without blinking. They never called it generosity. They called it normal. I didn't notice the shift at first. It happens gradually. Respect doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes. My opinions started being ignored. My stories interrupted. My presence tolerated rather than welcomed. They joked about my age, about my habits, about how I took up space. I laughed along because I thought humility was part of aging. What I didn't realize was that humility had quietly turned into permission. Permission for them to speak to me like an inconvenience. Permission to treat my money as theirs. Permission to forget who paid for the foundation beneath their feet. I stopped being dad. I became the backup, the emergency card, the solution to their problems, the man who would always fix things quietly so they wouldn't have to feel discomfort. That's the most dangerous role a parent can take on late in life, because once you're no longer seen as a person, only as a resource, the moment you stop providing, you become disposable. Looking back, the signs were all there. The eye rolls when I talked too long, the sighs when I asked simple favors, the way my birthday became just another inconvenience on their calendar. I thought love meant endurance. I thought being needed was the same as being valued. It wasn't. It was dependence dressed up as family loyalty. And I had financed it for years. Every dollar I gave came from decades of work, early mornings, late nights, missed vacations, a body that carried stress longer than it should have. I didn't inherit wealth. I built it, slowly, carefully, believing it would secure peace in my later years. Instead, it bought me disrespect. By the time they called me a burden, they weren't angry. They were comfortable. Comfortable enough to forget that everything they stood on was paid for by the man they were now pushing out the door. That night, lying in that motel bed, I finally allowed myself to do something I hadn't done in years. I added it all up. Not out of bitterness, out of honesty. And once you see the numbers clearly, once you realize how much of yourself you've given to people who no longer see you, something inside you changes. It doesn't break, it hardens. The betrayal didn't arrive all at once. That's what makes it dangerous. If it had been sudden, loud, unmistakable, I might have fought it sooner. But it crept in slowly, disguised as routine, disguised as stress, disguised as modern life. It started with small things. Conversations where my words seemed to vanish mid-sentence. I would be talking about something harmless, the weather, a book I was reading, a memory from years ago, and halfway through, Alice's eyes would drift back to her phone. Logan wouldn't even pretend to listen. He'd scroll, nod once, and wait for me to finish so he could speak about something that mattered more to him. At first, I told myself this was normal. Young people were busy. Life moved faster now. Then came the jokes. Little comments slipped into conversation like needles hidden in fabric. "You're old school, Dad. That's a boomer thing. You wouldn't understand." Always said with a smile. Always followed by laughter that made it sound harmless. I laughed too. I didn't want to be the sensitive old man who couldn't take a joke. But humor has a way of testing boundaries. Once people realize you'll tolerate disrespect, they push a little further the next time. They stopped asking before making decisions. Friends came over without warning. Furniture was moved. My things were relocated or thrown out because they were cluttering the house. My room, the one I was grateful to have, started being referred to as the spare. The spare. As if I were temporary. When I spoke up, even gently, the reactions were always the same. Sighs. Eye rolls. That look people give when they think you're being unreasonable. It's not a big deal. Why do you always make things awkward? You're reading too much into this. Gaslighting doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's just constant dismissal. I began adjusting myself without realizing it, talking less, asking for less, shrinking. I started timing my needs around their moods. If Logan looked stressed, I stayed quiet. If Alice seemed irritated, I waited. I told myself this was patience, maturity, the wisdom of age. What it really was conditioning. The money requests never stopped. They were always framed as temporary, always urgent, always justified. Just until the business stabilizes. Just until next month. Just this once. Every request came with an unspoken assumption that I would say yes. And I did. Because saying no felt like abandonment. Because I still believed being needed meant being loved. The tone changed, too. Gratitude disappeared first. Then acknowledgement. Then basic courtesy. When I helped, it was expected. When I hesitated, it was questioned. Why are you being difficult? You've never had a problem helping before. What's changed? What had changed was that I was starting to feel invisible. The night of my birthday barbecue wasn't an isolated incident. It was the result of years of erosion. By then, I wasn't asking for help. I was asking for permission. Permission to exist comfortably in a life I had paid for. Permission to invite friends into a house I had purchased. Permission to celebrate one day that was supposed to belong to me. When Alice called me a burden, it didn't come from anger. It came from certainty. Certainty built over years of me accepting less and less, while giving more and more. That's the most painful part. They didn't wake up one morning and decide to betray me. They learned that they could, because I taught them. I taught them every time I stayed silent, every time I apologized for asking too much, every time I gave money to avoid discomfort, every time I chose peace over self-respect. By the time they pushed me out the door, they genuinely believed I had nowhere else to go. And for a long time, they were right. But something changed the moment I stepped into that motel room with nothing but a suitcase and my thoughts. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to their needs. I was listening to myself. And once you hear that voice again, the one you buried under years of compromise, you can't unhear it. The decay had been slow. The awakening wouldn't be. The final betrayal didn't feel explosive. It felt precise, like a door closing softly but permanently. After my friends left that night, the house fell into an uncomfortable silence, the kind that presses against your ears, the kind that tells you a conversation is coming whether you're ready or not. Alice and Logan were waiting in the living room, not sitting, standing, arms crossed, faces tight, like two people rehearsing a verdict. "Nice little show you put on," Alice said, "inviting your friends without asking us." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something that hurt more than anger ever could. She wasn't upset. She was annoyed. "They're my friends," I said calmly. "It was my birthday." Logan scoffed. "That doesn't give you the right to do whatever you want." There it was. Not concern, not family tension. Authority. "This is our house," he continued. "You don't get to decide who comes in and out." I felt something tighten in my chest. Our house? The words echoed louder than he probably intended. The house I bought when they were drowning. The house I paid for when they had nowhere else to go. The house I put in their names because I trusted them. Alice stepped forward, her voice sharp and practiced. You live under our roof. That means you follow our rules. Rules. Like I was a teenager again. Like I hadn't spent decades building the very life they were now policing. I waited. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me still expected her to soften, to remember, to back down. She didn't. If this is how you're going to be, she said, maybe you should find somewhere else to live. The sentence landed clean. No hesitation. No regret. Find somewhere else to live. I nodded slowly. Fine. They looked surprised. I don't think they expected agreement. They expected resistance. Tears. Apologies. I didn't give them any of that. I went upstairs and packed. One suitcase. That was all I needed to prove how little space I had truly been allowed to occupy. Clothes. Toiletries. A framed photo of my wife. I paused when I picked it up, remembering how she used to worry about this very thing. Don't give so much that you disappear, she used to say. I wish I'd listened. When I came back downstairs, Alice and Logan were on the couch, pretending to watch television. They didn't look up when I rolled my suitcase past them. I placed my house key on the coffee table, not dramatically, not angrily, just placed it there. Alice finally looked up. Where are you going? Out, I said. The front door closed behind me with a quiet finality. No shouting, no chase, no last-minute realization, just silence. The cold Montana air hit my face as I stepped onto the porch. The street was empty. The lights were on in other houses. Families inside. Warmth. Belonging. I had none of that anymore. As I walked away, suitcase wheels rattling over concrete, something inside me finally broke. Not my heart, my loyalty. Because betrayal isn't always someone stealing from you or lying to you. Sometimes betrayal is realizing the people you sacrificed for no longer see you as human. They see you as a problem, as something to remove. By the time I reached the motel that night, I understood something with terrifying clarity. They didn't just disrespect me, they erased me. And when someone erases you from their life without hesitation, the only power you have left is to decide what parts of yourself they no longer get access to. Money, time, forgiveness, inheritance, love. I unlocked the motel door and stepped inside. That was the night I stopped being their father and became my own ally. The motel room was quiet in a way my life hadn't been for years. No tension humming beneath the walls. No careful listening for footsteps. No bracing myself for irritation if I spoke too loudly, moved too slowly, existed too much. Just silence. I lay on the narrow bed staring at the ceiling, suitcase unopened at my feet, and for the first time since Maria died, I let a thought fully form without pushing it away. I wasn't unloved. I was used. That realization didn't come with tears. It came with clarity, sharp, unforgiving, necessary. I slept better that night than I had in years. When morning came, I didn't wake up confused or ashamed. I woke up calm, focused, as if something heavy had finally been set down. I showered, dressed neatly, and looked at myself in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't broken. He was tired, but underneath the fatigue, there was something else. Resolve. I called a taxi and went straight to the bank. The teller recognized me. I'd been there countless times over the years, transferring money, fixing emergencies that weren't mine, smoothing over problems that should have taught lessons. "How can I help you today?" she asked. "I need to revoke authorized access on my accounts," I said. "Immediately." She paused. "All of them?" "Yes. My daughter's name, her husband's name. Each authorization removed methodically, cleanly, no drama." As the paperwork slid across the counter, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not anger, not triumph, relief. Because for the first time in decades, my money would only move if I decided it should. Outside the bank, my phone rang. Alice. I didn't answer. The second call came from Logan. I didn't answer that either. I went back to the motel, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened my laptop. The Hawaii reservation confirmation stared back at me. First-class tickets, Ocean View Suite, a vacation ID booked to celebrate family. I canceled it without hesitation. $20,000 vanished with a confirmation message and the soft electronic chime. I expected to feel cruel. I felt free. That afternoon, I made the most important call of my life. A lawyer. Not to threaten, not to punish, to reclaim agency. His office smelled like old books and professionalism. He didn't rush me. He didn't judge. He listened. "I want to rewrite my will," I said, "completely." He raised an eyebrow. "That's a significant decision." "So is being called a burden by your own child," I replied. We talked for over an hour, about assets, about trusts, about charities, about what it meant to leave something behind that actually reflected my values. By the time I signed the documents, my hands were steady. What I was doing wasn't revenge. It was correction. That night, my phone exploded. Missed calls, voicemails, texts that shifted from outrage to panic to thinly veiled threats. "You can't do this. This is illegal. You owe us." I listened to one voicemail from Alice, just one. Her voice wasn't worried about me. It wasn't remorseful. It was angry that the safety net had disappeared. That told me everything I needed to know. I called one person back. Not my daughter, not her husband, an old friend. Someone who had known me before I became an ATM, with a pulse. We met for coffee the next day. He listened quietly as I told him everything. When I finished, he didn't interrupt. He didn't offer platitudes. He said one sentence. "You finally stopped confusing love with obligation." That was my ally. Not someone who helped me plot. Not someone who escalated my anger. Someone who reflected the truth back to me without distortion. By the time I left that cafe, I knew something irreversible had happened. I would never again explain myself to people who benefited from my silence. I would never again finance disrespect. I would never again beg for a place in a life I had already paid for. The awakening wasn't loud. It was final. And the people who thought I was weak were about to learn something important. Silence, when chosen, is not surrender. It's strategy. I didn't announce what I was doing. That was the most important part. I didn't send long messages explaining my feelings. I didn't post anything online. I didn't warn them. I didn't threaten. I let silence do the work. People who live off your generosity panic fastest when the supply disappears without explanation. The first day after I cut off access, the calls were angry, demanding. confident. "You can't do this. You're overreacting. This is illegal." By the second day, the tone shifted. Confusion crept in. What's going on? Did the bank make a mistake? Can you just unlock it temporarily? By the third day, panic arrived. Voicemails at 3 in the morning. Texts written too fast, full of typos and desperation. Missed calls stacking up like unpaid bills. I didn't respond. I spent those days doing something unfamiliar. I watched. I checked my accounts. No more unauthorized charges. No sudden withdrawals. No emergencies I was expected to absorb. Peace has a very specific sound when you first hear it. It sounds like nothing. Behind the scenes, I was busy. I finalized the changes to my estate. Every account, every asset, clean lines, clear instructions, no ambiguity. I redirected my money toward causes that treated people with dignity instead of entitlement. I opened a new account, one only I could touch. No shared access, no emotional leverage. I booked consultations with people who didn't need me emotionally, only professionally. That's the difference. My daughter and her husband believed power came from proximity, from guilt, from obligation. They never understood that real power is paperwork, legal authority, financial separation, boundaries enforced quietly. I didn't need to punish them. I just needed to stop protecting them from consequences. The first real crack appeared when my phone rang late one afternoon. Unknown number. I answered. Logan. His voice was tight, controlled, artificially calm. "We need to talk." "No," I said. "You need money. Talking is optional." Silence. Then anger leaked through. "You're trying to control us." "No," I replied. "I stopped allowing you to control me." He tried intimidation next. Legal threats, accusations, words meant to scare an old man into compliance. I listened patiently. When he finished, I said one sentence. "You should talk to your lawyer before you call me again." Then I hung up. That's when they made their mistake. They came looking for me, not to apologize, to pressure. They found the motel easily. Small towns are like that. They showed up unannounced, confident that confrontation would bend me the way it always had. Logan led, aggressive, close, too close. He called me names, questioned my competence, threatened me with humiliation and legal action. And for the first time, I didn't shrink. I stood still. I watched him realize something was different, that I wasn't afraid, that I wasn't asking for approval, that I wasn't negotiating. A stranger stepped in, someone who owed me nothing, someone who recognized bullying when he saw it. Logan backed down. Bullies always do when the script changes. That was the moment the trap fully closed. Not because I outmatched him, because he exposed himself to others, to himself. After that, the messages changed again. Apologies appeared, suddenly heartfelt, suddenly emotional. I didn't mean it. She didn't mean it. We're family. They weren't apologies. They were invoices disguised as regret. I didn't respond. I let them sit in the discomfort they had avoided for years by handing it to me. Discomfort teaches lessons. Generosity never will. They began unraveling without my help. Bills piled up. Plans collapsed. Social embarrassment replaced financial comfort. And I did nothing. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply stopped interfering. That's the silent trap. When you step out of the role someone assigned you, they're forced to confront who they actually are without you. And most people aren't ready for that. What surprised me most wasn't how fast their tone changed, it was how confident they still were. Even after the cards stopped working, even after the vacation vanished, even after silence replaced my usual compliance. They still believed this was temporary, that I would calm down, that guilt would do its job, that time would soften me back into the role I deplayed so well for so long. Entitled people mistake patience for weakness. They don't understand boundaries until they hit them face first. Logan was the first to regain his swagger. A week after the motel confrontation, he left me a voicemail that sounded rehearsed, calm, polite, almost reasonable. "Ralph, let's stop escalating this. Alice is upset. You're upset. We all said things we didn't mean. Let's sit down like adults and talk this out." Talk this out? Translation: restore the old arrangement without accountability. I didn't respond. 2 days later, Alice tried a different approach. Her message came late at night. "Dad, I miss you. I've been crying all day. This isn't how I wanted things to be. Can we please talk? I just want my father back." That one almost worked. Almost. Because buried beneath the emotional language was the same expectation that I would fix things, that I would comfort her, that I would absorb the discomfort she was finally forced to feel. I didn't reply. The next attempt was public. They started telling people I was confused, depressed, not thinking clearly. Logan even hinted that I was being financially manipulated by outside influences. That one made me smile. People who've relied on your silence panic when you no longer protect their image. They thought embarrassment would bring me back in line. Instead, it exposed them. Friends started asking questions. Quiet ones. Careful ones. "Are you okay? Is everything all right at home? We heard some things." I answered honestly. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just facts. I was asked to leave. I stopped funding disrespect. I'm fine. That was enough. While they were trying to control the narrative, their own behavior started unraveling. Bills went unpaid. Plans fell apart. Social appearances became strained. They tried to maintain the illusion. New clothes, forced smiles, carefully curated posts. But money stress leaks. It always does. Logan's confidence cracked first. His messages became erratic, defensive, accusatory. He accused me of ruining his future, as if his future had ever been his responsibility. Alice followed soon after. Her apologies grew sharper. "You're punishing us. You're enjoying this. You're being cruel." Cruel. That word, coming from someone who called her own father a burden, felt almost poetic. They still didn't understand what was happening. They thought I was playing a game. They didn't realize I had simply stopped playing theirs. The entitlement peaked when Logan showed up uninvited again. This time, he didn't yell. He smiled. The kind of smile people use when they believe they still have leverage. "You can't keep this up forever," he said. "You need us too, you know." That was the moment I knew they truly didn't see me. They thought my value came from proximity to them, from being included, from being needed. They couldn't imagine a life where I chose peace over access to them, where I chose dignity over reconciliation, where I chose myself. Their arrogance wasn't loud. It was quiet and persistent. a belief that I would break before they did. They were wrong. Because entitlement collapses the moment it's forced to survive without subsidies. And the next step wasn't going to be quiet anymore. The hammer was coming. The moment everything changed didn't happen in private. It happened in public. That's what made it impossible for them to twist afterward. I was sitting in a small cafe downtown, the kind of place where people actually talk to each other, real conversations, real eye contact, no performance, no filters. I was halfway through a cup of coffee when my phone started vibrating on the table. Alice. I didn't plan to answer, but something told me this was the moment. I put the phone on speaker and set it down between my cup and the sugar jar. "What did you do?" Her voice exploded through the cafe. "My card just got declined, at Nordstrom, in front of everyone." A few heads turned. Conversations softened. People pretended not to listen, but they always do. I took a sip of coffee before answering. "How does it feel?" I asked. Silence. Then indignation. "How does what feel?" "Being embarrassed," I said calmly. "Being told no. Being reminded that access isn't ownership." "You're doing this on purpose," she snapped. "You're humiliating me." I smiled slightly. "No, I stopped protecting you from consequences. The humiliation is just the part you're noticing now." Her voice rose. Panic slipped in around the edges. "You can't just cut us off. We have obligations, bills, plans." "So did I," I replied, "for years." Someone behind me murmured approval, a quiet sound. Not meant for me, but felt anyway. "This isn't how family works," Alice said, desperation leaking through her anger. "You're right," I said. "Family doesn't call each other burdens. Family doesn't throw people out. Family doesn't confuse entitlement with love." Her breathing was fast now, shallow. "Logan says you're not thinking clearly. He thinks you need help." I laughed softly. "That's interesting," I said, "because the first clear thought I've had in years was realizing I don't owe my silence to people who benefit from it." The cafe had gone completely quiet. Then she said it, the line that erased any remaining doubt. "You're ruining our lives." I leaned back in my chair. "No," I said. "I stopped financing yours." And then I hung up. For a moment, no one spoke. Then someone clapped, slowly, deliberately. An older woman at the corner table. Then a man by the window. Then more. Not mockery, not spectacle. Recognition. People know this story. Maybe not mine, but some version of it. They know what it feels like to give until there's nothing left and still be told it isn't enough. I didn't bow. I didn't acknowledge the applause. I finished my coffee. Outside, the world went on like nothing extraordinary had happened. But for Alice and Logan, something irreversible had just occurred. The narrative was no longer theirs. They could no longer frame me as confused, weak, or cruel. Too many people had just heard the truth. And truth, once spoken calmly and without apology, is very difficult to erase. My phone buzzed again. Logan this time. I didn't answer. I already knew what he would say. Threats, accusations, blame. What he didn't realize was that the hammer had already dropped. Not through force, through exposure. And there was more coming. Collapse never looks dramatic at first. It starts quietly. Subtle fractures, missed payments, awkward phone calls, smiles that don't reach the eyes. After the cafe incident, the calls didn't stop. They multiplied. Alice left voicemails that swung wildly between fury and pleading. Logan's messages grew shorter, more aggressive, then suddenly restrained, as if someone had told him to be careful. They were losing control, and people who live on control don't handle that well. The first real sign came from someone unexpected. A friend of Alice's mother called me, carefully, hesitantly. "I don't want to get involved," she said, "but Alice hasn't been herself. She's borrowing money, small amounts, from different people. She says it's temporary." Temporary. That word again. Logan's business started unraveling next. I didn't need inside information. I could see it in the cracks. The frantic energy, the defensive tone, the sudden urgency when he spoke to me. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said during one call I answered out of curiosity. "This affects more than just us." "That's the first honest thing you've said," I replied. "Consequences usually do." He snapped then. The mask slipped. "You think you're teaching us a lesson," he said, "but you're just proving how selfish you are." Selfish? After decades of giving? I almost laughed. Alice's collapse was quieter, more painful. She stopped yelling, stopped accusing. Her messages became fragmented, emotional, childlike. "I can't sleep. Everything feels unstable. I don't recognize my life anymore." For the first time, she wasn't angry about money. She was scared. That was the moment I felt something close to sorrow. Not regret, sorrow. Because fear is what happens when entitlement loses its cushion. When the safety net disappears, you finally feel the height you've been standing at all along. They tried one last tactic, unity. They showed up together at my door one afternoon, faces arranged into something resembling humility. Alice cried, real tears, not loud, not manipulative, just exhausted. Logan stayed silent, jaw tight, hands clasped behind his back, like a man awaiting judgment. "We just want to fix this," Alice said. "We don't want to fight." I believed her. But belief doesn't erase memory. "You don't want to fix this," I said gently. "You want things to go back to how they were." Silence. I continued, "How they were only worked for you." Logan finally spoke. "We're drowning." I nodded. "I know." "You could help us," Alice whispered. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The woman she had become, the child she once was. And I said the hardest thing I've ever said. I already helped you for years. This is what life looks like when I stop. She broke then, not theatrically, not angrily. She just sat down and cried. Logan didn't say a word. That told me everything. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry it no longer worked. They left without a scene. No shouting, no threats, just quiet defeat. After that, the messages slowed, then stopped. Bills didn't magically disappear. Careers didn't recover overnight. Relationships strained under pressure they were never meant to withstand. And I didn't intervene. Not because I wanted to watch them suffer, but because rescuing them again would erase the lesson. Collapse is necessary when it reveals truth. And the truth was simple. They didn't lose me because I was cruel. They lost me because I finally refused to be consumed. Peace doesn't arrive with fireworks. It settles in quietly, like a deep breath you didn't realize you'd been holding for years. After they left that final time, my life grew smaller in the best possible way. Fewer voices, fewer emergencies, few demands disguised as love. I moved into a place that belonged entirely to me, No shared walls, no borrowed space, no tension humming beneath everyday moments. Just a modest house with wide windows and a porch that caught the evening light just right. I slept better. I ate when I was hungry, not when it was convenient for someone else. I cooked meals I liked. I took long walks without explaining myself. I read books without interruption. For the first time since my wife died, I felt whole rather than useful. I followed through on what I started. The charities received their funding, organizations that help seniors who had been abandoned, overlooked, erased, people who needed dignity more than pity. It felt right, not because I wanted to punish my daughter, but because legacy isn't about blood, it's about impact. Alice reached out once more, months later. Her message was careful, measured. No demands, no accusations. "I hope you're okay," she wrote. "I'm trying to figure things out." I read it. I wished her well in my heart. I didn't reply. Some bridges don't need to be burned. They just don't need to be rebuilt. Logan disappeared from my life entirely. I heard through others that his business never recovered, that stress changed him, that marriage tested limits it was never strong enough to handle. That wasn't my concern anymore. My responsibility ended where my control once did. I traveled alone for the first time in decades, not as an obligation, not as a reward for surviving another family crisis, just because I wanted to. I learned something late in life, but not too late to matter. Love without boundaries isn't kindness, it's self-erasure. Family loyalty doesn't mean endless sacrifice. It means mutual respect. And being a father doesn't require you to destroy yourself so others can live comfortably. If there's one thing I hope people understand from my story, it's this. Walking away isn't weakness. Staying and disappearing is. I didn't lose my family. I reclaimed myself. I went to the bank before lunch. I revoked every credit card authorization tied to my accounts. My daughter's card, her husband's card, every single one. That afternoon, I canceled their first-class vacation to Hawaii. Ocean View Hotel, rental car, the whole thing. $20,000 erased with a few taps on my phone. That evening, I sat in a law office and rewrote my will. Everything they expected to inherit would go somewhere else. Not out of spite, out of clarity. When my daughter called screaming about a declined card, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I asked her one question. How does it feel? She didn't understand. She still thought this was a tantrum. She didn't realize the game had already changed. Because when a man stops begging to be loved and starts withdrawing what he funded, what he enabled, what he tolerated, that's not revenge. That's accounting. And this was only the beginning.